All right, welcome back to another episode of Talk Fiber to Me, Baby. Here joined with us today is our Business Development and Strategy Officer of Mid South Extrusion, Mr. Matthew Dickerson.
What's up, Matt?
Hello.
Thank you buddy. For having me. Good to have you here.
Yeah.
And of course, myself, Caleb Etheridge, CEO of Etheridge. Well, actually, we're just EPC.
We're EPC now.
Man, it's kind of hard to let go of that. EPC, this is my brother, Josh Etheridge. He's the Chief Strategic Officer at EPC. And so, as we promised you, we're going to bring you some bi-weekly tidbits. We're going to talk all things, it's Talk Fiber to Me, Baby today. It might be Talk Workforce Development to Me, Baby for this session.
That's right? What y'all told me. If you bring anything else up, I don't know what I can do.
Right.
We're going to ask you all kinds of hard questions. You thought you were just here for that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So Matt is our resident in-house subject matter expert for all things workforce development, and he's really plugged in with what's going on in the state. And so we just thought it'd be great to, a lot of what we do here is we kind of set out to be almost like a little bit of a guide, a tool for a young entrepreneur that might be thinking about getting into the game or a business that's wanting to grow. Yeah. Look, we're not worried, we're not worried about the whole competition thing. We want we want jobs built. We want to see North Louisiana and the communities we go into grow. Yep. And so we kind of wanted, to have a piece of this podcast, this show, that we could bring in and talk to the folks about getting some workforce development tips and just kind of let people know what's going on in the business and the workforce development and education climate. So I know that, like I said, you're right smack dab in the middle of that. So give us a little lowdown on kind of what you're seeing there at the state level. I know the governor's got a lot of different things going on. He's kind of tasked some folks to go out and figure out how to elevate Louisiana's game, I guess, in that sector. So give us what you're seeing, what you're hearing out there.
Yeah, so right now I think it's a great time to be in Louisiana. Number one, we have the new administration that's come through a year into Governor Landry's administration. And what he ran on is what we're starting to see be delivered. And it's much that you're seeing at the national level, but there's changes. There's efficiencies that they're putting in place in state government. They're looking at all these agencies across the board to figure out how do we streamline government? How does government support business growth? Yep. And I think that's the message coming out of Baton Rouge and with our legislators, with our governors, with all the political side is they want to make Louisiana open for business. And one of those is through workforce. We know that workforce is critical. You guys are hiring. We're always hiring. Everybody around here probably has some kind of hiring sign or some kind of post on their social medias or their websites. And what the state's trying to do now is look from a public side. How does the public sector, how does your government agencies support workforce development? And so that's a lot of what's happening in Baton Rouge. There's a lot of things over the last year through some work with the Louisiana Workforce and Social Service Reform Task Force, which I was sat on as the industry representative, where there was a lot of great ideas of how do we streamline the support services, the wraparound services from the public side to better suit those employees, those individuals that we want to hire on the private side. And so there's a lot of those things happening. I would say this next legislative session is going to be a very focused topic. Is going to be workforce development, social service reform, and what that means for Louisianans.
As far as like how we got here, when you start thinking about how you got here, I know that that's an interesting story. I've heard it before. I know you personally. How did the state get here? What are you hearing from industry? How did the country get here? What are you hearing from industry across the country? What sparked this need for workforce development and new people in the industry?
Yeah, so I'd say this probably with the state level. So I was in public education for about 9 years here in Monroe City, and I started as a teacher and a coach, and I thought that was going to be my career path, and then moved into teaching career and technical education classes, and then finished my last couple of years at the central office where I was over those career and technical education programs. That afforded me the ability to travel around the state and meet with these people at the state level, at the government level, and all those to talk about how education and workforce happens. So you rewind back almost 10, 14, probably about 12, 14 years ago, and the state of Louisiana changed and implemented what they call Jumpstart. How that came about was really the industry at the state at that time having enough vision to look ahead and go, hey, if we don't start changing things, we're not going to have the people that we need. So I've been afforded the opportunity to kind of live through that cycle, and now we're here where we're going, we don't have all the people that we need.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I think from an education side, you have the K-12 partners, your middle school, high school programs they're trying to figure out how do we adapt to develop a workforce that's ready for 2025 and beyond.
What kind of opportunities are you seeing? I know where we struggle is we still have people come in our office. I'm sure y'all do too, and they say to us like, "We didn't even know you were here." Yeah. And look, we've got a pretty decent marketing campaign we run, and we still have folks that walk in and they say, "We didn't." I still harken back to Irvin Kraft, where his wife ran into one of my friends who was a chiropractor, happened to see my business card on his desk, and said, "My husband does this in Montana. I didn't even know that there was somebody here doing this." There seems to be an awareness piece that there's a lack of awareness between what we need in industry and that individual that's coming out of K through 12. What are you seeing? What are the kind of leans you're seeing in maybe what the governor or what the education side's wanting to do to try to combat that awareness problem? Yeah.
So last year, Bessie approved a new accountability model, which y'all guys might be familiar with, but they're changing how the high schools are accountable and scored, essentially, which takes effect in 2026. So that's a big change happening at the K-12 level. There's people from both sides of the aisle that feel positive and negatives about it. I think overall what it's going to force K-12 to do is to work with their community partners, being business and industry, which is ultimately from the private side, we want that. Mm-hmm. The more we can get into the schools and talk about these programs, talk about these opportunities, brand awareness. Mm-hmm. Hey, there's opportunities here in Northeast Louisiana. You don't have to travel to these other states. Right. And so that's a message that's getting pushed right now. The challenge is some schools are better prepared for that based on the programs that they've historically offered through AG and FFA and all that. But you have some other schools that either don't have the resources when it comes to financially, they don't have the space, and they don't have the teachers is the big thing. Mm-hmm. It's where a lot of programs like ours, where we're teaching manufacturing related programs and you guys are teaching, trenching and everything else. Like you're going to find a science teacher or a social studies teacher or a coach or somebody else to teach that class. Is it really going to be as valuable and meaningful? And so that's the challenge that we've got to face from partnering with K-12 is go, hey, how do we invest? How do companies invest in our education system? Not just from a gimme, right? Just give me the people, but let me help when they're in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Build them up to when they get ready to graduate, they have an opportunity to either go and continue education into a 2-year program, go into continuing education into a 4-year program or a short-term program, and then enter the workforce. And not just enter the workforce to say they entered the workforce, but actually at a living wage, high quality wage to where they can reinvest back into the community. Yeah,
and I was going to ask, you mentioned opportunities and, we're sitting here talking about trying to, solve that awareness gap. Let's take a moment and throw a teaser out. What's going on in Mid South? What are the open jobs right now that folks may not know about? This could be a medium to just get that out, whoever's listening, just to prove the point of there are good paying jobs out there.
So Mid South's a great company. So we make plastic. We make raw plastic. It's very simple, but it's not as simple as that, but we blow film, we make it into big plastic rolls, and then we ship it to people that make it into bags and your furniture bags. You buy the pretzel stand-up pouches at the store, like that's all of our plastic. And so we've announced just over the last few months a $17 million expansion. So we're adding 2 more production lines. So we currently have 12, adding 2 more, which gives us another 14, 15 million pounds of volume that we can run out of that plant. What's great about Mid South is the Anderson family, the leadership at Mid South is committed to growing in South Monroe.
Right.
And so if you drive down where we're not but a few blocks from the plant now, and it looks like a tornado's come through there and ripped a building in half because we're taking a warehouse, we're ripping the roof off. It's going to be a high bay like the other buildings on our property. And then we've got capacity there to put about another 8 to 10 lines. Inside that warehouse. So we're positioning ourselves for growth. Well, growth includes more jobs.
Right.
With this expansion, you're talking about 21 direct jobs. I think the state shows us about 60 indirect all around type jobs that you're talking about. And that's just with a company else. Now, we fancy ourselves a large company, but we're small compared to the rest of the industry.
But that just goes to show you that opportunity that's there. Like we have so many openings as well, and I feel like there's probably people that are going to listen to this. That's the first time they've heard that. There's an awareness piece there.
I mean, do you feel like, and this is just me, like I'm going to throw a little color in the podcast. I feel like there's a lot of things being said, but do Do you feel like somewhere along the lines, education at some point was ultimately to further industry, further yourself in a workforce, to create something great, to make America, in the forefront again? I was going to say, finish it, make America great again. But you get what I'm saying. Like, where did we lose focus? And it started becoming let's get them to this tier, and let's have them test for this, and let's have them test for that. Like, when did we lose focus? You said a while ago, you said something that was like, on the private side.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what else is there?
Yeah.
There's only the private side. The public school system is here to feed the workforce and create new creations.
Yeah.
And you want to spark that intellectual drive in a kid or in a young adult to either create something or become part of something bigger than themselves to further the workforce.
Yeah.
And I feel like somewhere we became like this like private side, public side, when I don't know what the good in having a public side is if it's not to further the private side. Yeah. Is that are you seeing some of that in the state where they're breaking down those barriers and they're saying, hey, it's all, if we can create more private side, it gives more taxes and we can do more with that, and it just
when you look at progress across the nation, a lot of it's going to be using terms like industry partnerships or sector partnerships, or we've got NELAMAC, which is our Northeast Louisiana Manufacturers Alliance and Consortium. That's a group of manufacturers, private businesses that come together, and we talk about the hard things that we're struggling with in our industry sector. That model's designed so that your community partners, your public partners, sit around that table and they hear about the pain points. And then their role in that partnership is that they provide solutions so that the private businesses, the industry, will continue to thrive. Mm-hmm. Years ago, you look back, and the transition happened when, out of Washington and out of the nation. It's not just unique to Louisiana, but we started having this push for a 4-year university degree. And we felt like that was the end all. Probably in that moment, that was before our time, but probably in that moment, it was a good decision because it made sense based on the jobs that were available.
Right.
Now, what's different as a nation, when that generation was coming through, they were well stocked with tradesmen, men and women that were shipbuilding and all coming out of World War II. That generation had all of those skills to do the services that we all need, which we call blue-collar jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you start to see the generation move and go, well, all those jobs are filled. Now we start advances in technology. Now we start advances in the financial markets, and the banks begin to explode, and all these things start to transpire. So the careers start to look different.
Right.
Well, instead of saying we can have both and, somewhere in the grand landscape, somebody said, well, we just need to focus on 4-year because that's where these graphs are telling us growth is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a decision, much like we all make business decisions day in and day out, and we can get so focused on one thing that we miss all this other.
Yeah.
And so you go rewind the tape, and I bet there was a conversation in a small office, probably somewhere in Washington, D.C., that felt like, hey, we need to really push this 4-year degree. That then trickled down to the states and became a common practice. I love education. I'm connected to education. I tell people all the time, I didn't get out of education because I didn't like education. I love and I have a heart for education. We have some incredible teachers all across this state and all across this country. Men and women that commit themselves to do way more than they ever expected in and out of the classroom, where teachers have to be fathers, they have to be mothers, they have to be counselors, they have to be doctors, they have to be just all the circle of things that these teachers have to do.
Oh, yeah.
How do you expect them to be able to prepare and deliver a quality product at the end of graduation when they're fighting all that?
Yeah, a lot of red tape.
So one thing that we want to see is we want to kind of unburden these teachers. Give them a topic. Let them focus on whatever that social studies or science or whatever that they're focused on in that moment. And then look at business and industry to go, how do we support them?
Yeah.
How do we bring in the subject matter experts to do the fiber thing, the manufacturing thing, the welding thing, the nursing thing, and not put an extra load on the school districts for that?
What do you think that primary conversation is now? If you were to say, like, here's one thing that if we could affect just this, we could move the needle in workforce development in Louisiana.
Yeah.
What's one of those most crucial things that just first thing that pops to your mind? We got to do
I think it's employability.
Right? Okay.
And what I mean by that is like that's just a term people float out there. But what does employability mean? People that can pass a drug test. People that know how when they clock in, they're expected to work and produce a product throughout that day. That they work with a team, work within a team. They function. And all of these things that seem natural to probably you and I. It's like you have a generation that's coming out where everything that's been focused on is in this little screen. Right? And how do I operate in that? How do I operate in a new workforce? Yeah. Then you've got the generation that are kind of like us. We're a little bit older now. That we're trying to figure out how do we handle this next generation that's coming in that want to be tech savvy. They want to do everything off of their phone, or they want to do everything using technology. But I think for what the conversation is across the country, we need our people at work. And we need to have pride in working. And we've lost that as a nation. We've lost that at the state level, whether that was by nature, meaning that was the process that we created, or by nurture, which we kind of intentionally created through the social service system. And I've had these conversations with people all over the place. And it's not an attack on welfare. It's not an attack on social services. Those were instituted for a great purpose. They were instituted coming out of the Great Depression to move a person out of their current circumstances, which affected the whole country, and put them back into the workforce. Not to just give them these benefits so that they would stay on these benefits, but to move them back into the workforce, because we know it's only natural when somebody is working and they're employed and they're giving their time and receiving some kind of compensation, that they're a better, more active citizen.
I would be willing to bet, and I've said this a few times over the last couple of days, I'd be willing to bet that healthcare, the health of a person is shown to be directly influenced by their employability and them being employed. I even think that their education and what level of education they go to also has an effect on both their healthcare and their lifestyle. I mean, I think that even incarceration rates, I think, have been linked to education and healthcare. Sure. I think that with an increase in all of those things, that you see a better state, a better state of well-being as far as communities are concerned. So I think that I'm going to say something that not being the expert, I'm just going to be the guy I'm just the guy sitting here across the table from the expert. But
here we go.
Yeah, we'll get on soapbox just a little bit. What do you think? Do you think that everybody has the same opportunities to learn about the vocations and the workforce that's out there, the opportunities that's out there in the workforce? No matter geographically, we're a very rural state. Geographically speaking, do you think that people in urban areas have the same opportunities as people in rural areas?
Let me kind of answer that from this position. Do I believe that everyone has the same opportunities available to them? Yes. What does available look like? Now that's where we got to get into it.
Yeah.
And so being in rural communities, being in urban sectors, opportunities are really more in your face because you're in it, you're seeing it, you're active. But you go out into our more rural populations, the most impoverished part of our entire nation is about 60 miles that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Lake Providence.
Yeah. And so you look and you go, okay, well, what's the disadvantage? Well, the disadvantage is being so rural.
Yeah.
And there's not industry that's moving out there. And there's not new advancements that's happening out there. I mean, you have agriculture, which is very critical. But when you have a large population, it's not sustainable when there's not industry, there's not other businesses.
It's isolated.
Yeah.
There's no awareness factor.
But does that keep EPC if somebody's from Lake Providence from having an opportunity at EPC? No.
Absolutely.
And so is the opportunity available? Absolutely. How do we get the opportunities to them is the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and then,
I agree.
We talk about some different things with industry and how do we get them to. What's some stuff that maybe Mid South and some things y'all are working on trying to bridge that gap to get the opportunity out to the person who needs it?
Look, we've looked and just geographically at our plant location, and you guys that are listening and watching, you can Google Mid South Extrusion. We're on Jackson Street. Our community that surrounds our plant, the number of people that are not working or not actively engaged in the workforce just in that community would allow us to do as much expansion as we want to do. And they could walk to work.
Right.
We know that population is there. We know that there's people that live across the street and down the street from our facility who aren't actively engaged in the workforce. Now, circumstances are all different. Those could be health issues, those could be family issues, whatever it might be. But there is a large population, which I refer to as the disconnected population, that somehow when they left high school, they just disappeared. They disappeared into society.
What's that statistic again? I know that we threw it around that night. We kind of went over to Neville High School and did our little awareness deal. We were trying to just whatever we could do to kind of get the awareness out. But what was that statistic ballpark that was?
I mean, it was a third, basically a third of the population
that walks across that stage does not have plans,
had no plan
to either enter the workforce or enter a 2 or 4 year education institution. So that is, I don't have a plan to go to work tomorrow. I'm not going into 4 or 2 years. I'm just not even military, I don't believe. And they're just disappearing into society.
And most of them were not. It's not unique to the local high schools. It's every high school across the board. You can look. They're going to have a similar, probably some kind of demographic that says, I might want to do something. I might want to go to college. I might want to go to a local community college. I might want to go into work. But I don't know where that is. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means.
We have an awareness problem.
Can we compare those statistics to, say, incarceration or even like subsidy programs? Can we say, hey, there they are, or is that like they're missing from those numbers?
Just look in our community, and this is a couple of years statistic. But what's the average age of violent crimes in Monroe?
I don't know.
16 to 24.
16 to 24 years old.
Like. Largest majority of crimes committed in Monroe.
It's a great workforce age.
16 to 24. And so, and I've asked the chief for this, and I think it's something we need to follow up on. I need to follow up on. It's just a statistic. Is how many of those that you've arrested for that are gainfully employed?
Right.
I mean, that'll tell the story.
Right.
And look, you can go back into Proverbs, and I think the Bible answers a lot of these questions, but I won't go too far, but it's idle hands.
Mm-hmm. Idle hands.
What happens? And so when the individuals leave high school and they go into the community, and they might say, I need to take a year off, right? We've all been there. I need to stop and take a break. I've been educated for 18 years. I need to take a break, right? If you don't have a plan and a support system in that year's time, your success of coming out of that and getting back into college or getting back into something, it just drops tremendously. And so when you look at our demographics and you look at our populations and you look at divorce rates and you look at single mothers, that's the largest part of this in the welfare system. How many single mothers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids?
Right.
There's not an income. There's not a salaried position you could pay or I could pay to support that mother and those children.
So here's what we're trying to say is the answer. It looks grim, but the answer is go to work. And that's the point is that this is not lost on your task force, on what y'all put in front of the governor. You've got real material things. Let's talk about those things for a second. We'll double back to them. Just some specifics. What out of those recommendations have y'all pointed the governor at in the workforce, in the education? What can these folks expect to help them re-engage with the workforce?
Yeah, so before I get to that, I want to say one thing. Because this is not Matt's idea. I get a lot of credit for things that I say, but ultimately you go back to Genesis.
I will say if it's my idea, I will.
Yes, I know you will. I would. But you go back into Genesis, and what God told Adam was He said, "Here's the garden, and I give it to you to keep it and cultivate it." Work. Right? But somewhere we teach this.
It was in Genesis?
Yes.
Translation,
work. From the very beginning.
Man was made to work.
Workforce development started was in Genesis. And then we have this idea that because of sin, right, where He kicked Adam out of the garden and said, you've got to work and you're going to toil and you're going to sweat and all these things, that we felt like that was where work was instituted. No, it goes back. So why is work so important? Well, it's important enough for God to create it from the very beginning. Why would we not expect it to be important in 2025?
Task us with it.
Right?
He tasked us with it out of the gate.
That's Matt's motivation when it comes to workforce development. But to answer your question, what we're seeing at the state is what that task force finished up with. We're in the final draft right now of what we're going to propose to the governor and to the legislatures. But in a summary of that is making it more accessible for individuals to find the service and support that they need in the community. And then those services connect that person to a career.
Right.
And you're like, well, that's a simple idea. Like, that's an easy idea. Great intentions happen every day with our social services and our public partners. But the problem is the bureaucracy, the processes, the red tape, all the rules and all the legislation, it gets so busy just on the intake of these individuals and meeting their needs that it's second thought, it's afterthought to get them into the workforce actively, like, and as quickly as possible. And so one of the things that we did, we went as a group, there's about 20 of us that went to Utah. Utah did this, they've been doing this since like the 90s, what they call the one-door model.
Okay.
Which essentially they consolidated into one workforce branch for the entire state. They're very rural. They have a couple of areas, Salt Lake City, and then everything else is pretty rural. So we can relate to that. But they consolidated this department to help break down having to go to this office and that office and this office and that office for people to receive these benefits. And the very first thing when we walked in the door, the very first thing they did is they met you at the reception and then they pointed you to the job center. Like, hey, here's a bank of computers. Let's get your information put in. Let's see what your resume is. If you need a resume, if you don't need a resume, so on and so forth. And they're actively trying to connect those individuals while the caseworkers working on the social services support to get you in the workforce as fast as possible. Because they know what we all know now is that the social service system is not set up to support a generation of people.
So in our state, we're siloed.
Very much.
So you could be duplicating different.
We are duplicating.
We're duplicating a lot of different subsidies. Like they're all overlapping, and we don't know when to get off of one and on another. Yeah. And we also don't know how they're doing as far as a workforce at going out there and actively trying to get into the workforce. And so that's what the one door. What is Utah's? What is their statistics like as far as where they're ranked, and why did we choose Utah as far as like, are they doing better or they just have a better system?
It's a long road, and that was one of the first questions they asked, like what changed in your labor force participation? So when you're in this conversation around workforce, that's really the statistic you look at, labor force participation. I think the country's at like 56 or 57%, which means of the available workforce, 57%.
You're kidding me.
And then you have the state of Louisiana, I think we're at like 52 or 53%.
Okay.
So we're not, but you say, well, that's not too bad. But that's still like hundreds of thousands of people. That's different.
When you apply that to a total population, it's a big number.
We would say that the United States needs to be at like 62, 63. And those might have been changed. Those are some other data points. But you want to see like how far, like what does 1% look like?
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And so we're a state of 4 million people.
Right.
If I move 1%, like, your jobs are filled, my jobs are filled, probably everybody's jobs here.
Everybody in this region's jobs are filled.
But you have to look at, and this I was talking to a company yesterday, and just talking to the executive, and he's expressed the frustration of like, we've been in this situation for so long, I don't know that it's ever going to change, which is understandable. Which then companies start to look and go, well, I just got to look elsewhere. I got to look at other states. And I want to go, look, I've been at other states.
It's not any better.
Not everybody else is figuring this out either.
No.
But I can say with confidence that I feel like what we'll see in the state of Louisiana over this next year is some of those hard decisions, which we're going to have to push legislatures on. We're going to have to push the governor on. I'm saying, look, this is not going to be received well by the public. Because anytime you start talking about social services, people feel like it's an attack against the welfare system. And if it's not messaged correctly and put out correctly and communicated correctly, it's gonna have some struggles. But there's a population of people. We've got big projects happening all around us in rural parishes. And that's just one. I know there's going to be a trickle effect that's going to follow.
100%.
Right? And somebody's like, well, we don't have the workforce. Well, when you look at the statistics, we have a population of able-bodied men and women all across this region who are not participating in the workforce.
I got asked, I'm like, what do you think is some of the great reasons that somebody would want to come here? And I actually highlight that as one of the great reasons of a business to come here and start a business. Yeah. If you were out there and you were looking to come and start a business, we have a large population of able-bodied men and women who have great moral character and great work ethic. And they're just disconnected and not participating. And that's the problem we got to solve, but it doesn't mean they're not there. There's a great raw workforce out there for businesses to tap into.
And I think there's the stigma of, those that receive benefits. right? That they're lazy, and
Yeah.
all those things. I mean, that's a real stigma that those individuals have to deal with. And look, at the end of the day, I'm a fan of the social service system, but I'm not a fan of it being manipulated to negatively affect that individual and their family,
Right.
which is a lot of what's happening. It's because right now the way the system's set up is I have a $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 job, and the individual that lives across the street from me, who's receiving full benefits, gets their house, their food, everything paid for, they can't take my job. Because as soon as they take my job, they've reached their threshold of income, which they've exceeded, and then they're going to get kicked out of their house because they don't own the home.
Right.
Right? It's government housing.
The way we've got the system set up,
So
it doesn't even
system's broken.
incentivize you to get back into the
That's
workforce. Right.
And so the state, I think it was last year's legislative session, I can't remember who put the bill forward, but I know we passed it. So it basically says, like, if you're an individual and you're an employee or unemployed and you schedule an interview, which is part of your receiving your benefits, you have to be actively looking for a job. If you schedule an interview and you don't show up, that's notified to the social service office.
Yeah.
And you can lose your benefits.
Yeah.
Like, it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're receiving benefits, you receive the benefits because you should be actively looking for a job.
Yeah.
If there's a job out there that's willing to pay you and it's enough to get you off the benefits, the system wants you to come off of them.
Right.
But instead, they were finding these loopholes where, well, I could show up and I could just continually interview, right? And I don't really have any interest in this job. I just got to be here so that I can show that I interviewed. So they're trying to close those loopholes.
Right. Some of that reminds me of like getting people into, I'm a proponent of workforce education and technical colleges. I'm somebody that graduated from a technical college. Product of, that's the word I'm looking for. But I also see where you can get these programs that pay for their program, for them to go through these programs. Yeah. They had no intention of actually joining the workforce. Yeah. They just got, the money.
That's the loophole.
That's the loophole. They go in, they take the classes. When they come out, they're like, I didn't really want to do that. I just got it for free, so I'm going to go do another one now. Yeah. And they're a perpetual student. Yeah. The question is, how do you tie that metric back to who got a job?
Yeah. So I had a conversation today with our community college. Mm-hmm. And told them from Mid South's point of view, we want to partner with them because we don't have any problem getting applicants. Probably like you guys. Y'all are inundated with resumes and applications.
Hundreds a week,
right? We might hire 1, 2, 3 people over the next couple of weeks. But we've got hundreds of applications. Mm-hmm. Of the hundreds of applications, statistically speaking, we can cut 50% out. They're just applying to apply, right? Mm-hmm. So you got 50 applications. We're going to hire 3. You got 47 people who actively would like a job, but you don't have the space for them. So what do you do with them?
We need some way to get them back in.
You just file them away.
Yeah.
You just put them in. I might come back to them, or then I'm going to open the job up and I'm going to get new resumes, so it's going to be new people. Mm-hmm. And those people just kind of drift off. Mm-hmm. Well, how many times does the door get closed in your face? Not you, because you're an outlier. Do you stop answering and knocking on the door?
Yeah.
Right. Josh will beat the door down.
Right.
But most of us would be very discouraged by the doors. Like, there's no opportunities here. And really, instead of the industry partners going, hey, I got 47 people. Like, here, Delta, here's 47 people. They're interested in the workforce. Maybe you can meet with them and see what skills, and maybe you've got some connections to other ones.
Delta Community College.
Yeah, Delta Community College. Yeah. And so it's that mindset from an industry side that we've got to change. Like, so far, so many generations, and even when I was in public education, business and industry really weren't engaged. Now, some were, but most of us weren't engaged until they were 18 and older and out of when they can come be fully employed. Well, by that time, we've already missed them. Like, if I'm not investing in these young people early in some kind of program, if my brand's not, if the schools don't see Mid South Extrusion or MSC or EPC or graphic packaging or all these other companies in their schools, the students aren't going to know where to look. And if we expect them to, hey, here's your diploma, best of luck, pat on the back, and then the next day after they're hopefully not recovering from a hangover, they're supposed to go find a job, and we think that system's going to work.
Man, I totally agree with that. I think that there's a lost. We looked at the enrollment age for LCTCS is like 27, and I can totally relate to that. because, I went to sales and then went off to Dallas and then went to Fort Worth and then Texas and Oklahoma. And then once we had a layoff, I realized I have no marketable skills, which is still the case. That's why I'm CSO. Nobody knows what it means. But other than that, when I came back, I went to technical college and they were like, you need something marketable, something concrete that the industry wants. Yeah. And once I got that, now I was 24, but the average age coming back is 27. Yeah. And so for us, I feel like to make a huge change in the workforce, a friend of mine, he works at the Social Security office and he's very educated. Yeah. And he says, Josh, you don't understand. Some of these are second and third generation recipients. They would not know how to turn this around. That's if you told them tomorrow it was shut off, they wouldn't know how to turn this around. Yeah. However, what we could do is a transition period starting in your high schools where you make these schools aware of what is out there. Yep. Really start ingraining in it, because I go back to the private versus public. It's all private. Yeah. It's all private. It's all, our ultimate goal needs to be to further the GDP of our great nation. And so, getting in these kids' heads early so that we can make a difference in the next generation to close that 18 to 27-year-old gap and get them directly in after the hangover, right? Get them directly in and know where they want to go because they've been studying what the workforce looks like up until that day. Yeah. Then we really made a difference. I just feel like that's the only way to make the transition. Without it, I feel like we're trying to catch a falling knife. I think it's too much of an ask, and I don't know how it would be affected if you couldn't get into those schools.
And the best way to do that is for industry to take the approach of pulling students through their education. Right. Instead of just waiting here going, I hope I catch one or two.
Right.
Let me invest on the front end and be a partner in the education system at the K-12 level, at the higher ed level, to pull those individuals into the workforce. Now, it's not just like MSC going in and like adopting a student.
Right.
But it's
can't do that. It's illegal.
Yeah. It's investing in the program. Yeah. It's investing in the program to say that, hey, they're hearing this information. They're talking about these programs. And it's not where most career courses are, very broad and generic about being a doctor and a lawyer and all these things. But we want them, when they're talking about welders, we want them to talk about James Machine Works,
right?
Steel fabricators, right? Pulp mill services. When they're talking about construction, they want to talk about EPC. When they're talking about manufacturing, you want them to talk about graphic and Mid South Extrusion and these companies.
That right there is a perfect segue. What's the call to action? I mean, we've got an audience that's filled with young adults probably looking for these jobs and trying to figure out like what's out there. But we also have there's a viewership out there that are people like us that's trying to figure out, how do I get plugged into all these things that I'm hearing right now in this last few minutes? How do I get plugged in? What's the call to action for them? What do you need from industry? Because like you said, it's not just a gimme. You need to invest.
That's right.
Those folks that are sitting here watching right now, how can they jump in and help?
There's a couple of ways. I think any partner, regardless where you find yourself, whether you're in Monroe, Louisiana, or Washington State, probably any K-12 partner would welcome an industry business into their schools to talk to their students, to share about what programs that they have or what needs that they have. So that's one way.
Yeah.
Getting plugged into your community, your chambers of commerce, your economic development groups, being involved in those things that are happening. We got a lot happening right now over the last few years, but it's not always like that. But going to those places and saying, hey, I've got to get people in. Otherwise, my business will not succeed.
Yeah. So let's drop some names there. The Economic Development Group, who are they reaching out to?
Yeah, so Grow Nela's meeting with everybody. They're running around.
Rob is in overdrive right now.
You reach out to Rob Cleveland, he'll meet with you whenever his schedule allows. It might be at 10 o'clock at night, but that's what he'll do. They're going to come out and meet with you. We got teams from LED, from Baton Rouge that are coming up because of the things that are happening in Northeast Louisiana. Yep. You got your Monroe Chamber of Commerce, your West Monroe Chamber of Commerce.
Some good cheerleaders.
All of these groups that are in the public space to support business and industry. And most of the problem is business and industry, like you guys know it. Man, when it starts to hit the fan and when stuff's growing and we got sales to do. Yeah, man, I'm focused on growing my business. I need somebody to be a partner with me to help support the growth that I'm doing. But so much, we get so focused on like the day-to-day operations of our businesses that it takes time. And so your investment might not be financially. It might be, hey, I'm going to schedule some time to go and talk to a school, to go to meet with our superintendents, to go to meet with the chambers of commerce, to have these conversations. Because then you get those guys men and women all across the community to help connect you with your future workforce.
Right.
And then you support things that are coming and changes at the legislative level. Policy has to change. Right? The social service system is a government funded. It's funded from Washington down to the states. What we're trying to do in the state of Louisiana is make that funding a little bit more easier for the state to manage,
right,
so that it's actionable and it can be deployed quickly without a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape.
Man, I'm glad you said that. There's going to be some entrepreneurs on here that is going to listen to this and they're going to say, man, I don't know how that applies to me. I am so head down, pulling the load, you know. I don't see where this is applicable to me because I'm just trying to get through my next day.
Sure.
But you said investment, and most people think of that as a piece of equipment or technology, when truthfully you're actually investing in your own workforce and you don't even realize it. Like taking that time out to both, better yourself and better your area as far as workforce education is concerned.
Well, look, I think there's no probably better example sitting in this room than you two.
I don't know about that.
You two, I give a lot of credit for, like, you're great people and I love you to death. But how big would your company be if it was just you two doing all the work and you didn't have a team of people around you?
I'd already fired Caleb.
Right? Like, one, y'all would have been at each other's throats. But ultimately, the business would not have been able to grow without building people around you.
Right.
And so for young entrepreneurs, don't be afraid to hire your first person.
There we
That's
go.
it.
That's
Look,
the message.
Woo, I think that's a great that's an exclamation point.
Are we
on
having
this
another
segment.
episode? Or this
Oh, yeah. We will.
I was going to say, we can take off with that and just have a second
Yeah, we'll have a
episode.
second episode. Let's talk about, like,
follow up.
What all did we make missteps when we were first? Like, I can remember many. Caleb telling me we got to hire somebody for this, and I was just like, "What?
Yeah,
I'm working my tail off out here, Like
just
you
pay me more money.
You want to? Yeah, I'll work twice as hard, I guess, But it's true. It's you have to invest in your people so that you can get better.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate you. On a short notice, you came in here. Of course, we knew you would. If you had time, you were going to make it for us.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you after the last guy canceled and you just showing up like
It was a long list. We made it to you. Said yes right out of the gate.
Man, the fourth guy down.
Made it.
Look again. I think we covered it all. We talk about this kind of a blueprint there. The things that are going on at the state, our challenges, but then also our opportunities and what this new executive, the governor's new administration is doing. A few tidbits for our young. Our growing entrepreneurship, your business owners, some little tidbits there, and also a little sprinkle in for what some of those young adults can do to try to get plugged in. Yeah. So really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. And
absolutely.
Thank you guys for watching. This is episode 4 of Talk Fiber to Me, Baby. We'll see you next time.